Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is Venomous Threats, Safeguarding Against Springtime Bites. So in case we haven't met before, my name is Holly Foxworth. I'm a registered nurse, and I'm also the Marketing Communications Director here at Axiom. We're thrilled that all of you have joined us today. And so obviously, as the weather continues to warm up, then that obviously increases the risk that you're going to have some unexpected encounters with some of these snakes, spiders, ticks, etc. And so that really is what we want to do today, regardless what industry that you're in. This definitely applies to you. And not only does it help to just have the additional information, but it's also can be a life-saving thing as well for some of your employees. So that's really our goal today, is really to identify some of those venomous species. We want to know what it is that you're going to do if you're bitten. We want to know how it is that you can avoid some of those common and dangerous mistakes, and really get you some tools to be able to identify those things. So we have an incredible panel of experts as usual. We have Dr. Scott Cherry, which is our Chief Medical Officer. He's going to walk us through kind of the medical side of the venomous bites. So he'll talk about how it is that you can kind of identify some of these things, where it is that you would want to seek treatment, things that you don't want to do, etc. We also have Emily Roberts from Snake Discovery. She's the owner of Snake Discovery. She's also a YouTube star, in case you guys have not seen her channel yet, but they have fantastic videos there. We were just talking about all of her snakes. I think Emily said that they had over 200 species, along with 75 there at their home as well. So they have quite the expertise in snakes. So Emily's going to walk us through how it is that you can kind of spot these in the wild, what you need to be looking for. And then Dara is our Chief Marketing Officer. She always has the best stories, and she's going to give us kind of some firsthand experience about an incident that she had with a bite, but then also kind of give us some practical tips on how it is that we can avoid some of those encounters. So before we get started, I want you to look there at your screen. I want you to look on the right-hand side there at the top, and you should see that there is a maroon-looking box there. That is our next webinar that we're going to be hosting on May the 15th, 1:00 p.m. The title of that one is Heat Stress Prevention, Keeping Your Cool as Temperatures Rise. So not only do we like talking about heat injury prevention, but also we have a really special guest that's going to be coming on. We have the team from Epicor that's going to be joining us. And if you're not familiar with them, they actually created some technology products. So they have a product that monitors your hydration status. And so they had originally created that for Gatorade, and then they teamed up with one of our other clients, which is Chevron, to make that into a wearable patch that goes there on their arm. So they're going to be joining us, talking about how it is that works, what the role of technology is moving forward, and the results that they had. Just kind of give you a sneak peek there. He did say that this last year that they utilized that they had 0 heat-related injuries or illnesses. So I'm definitely excited to see what it is that they can share with us. I know that you guys will be too, in case it's something that you want to implement in your own organization. Now, one thing I do want to show you there at the bottom, you should see a box that says enter your question. That is the chat Q&A box. That's exactly where you want to be if you want to receive some of these gifts and prizes that we always send out after the event. So we want you to engage with us. We want to hear what your questions are. We want to hear if you've had an experience with a snake, a spider bite, a scorpion, whatever it may be, whether it's you, your family member, an employee. Tell us about the experience. What did you do? What was it like? Do you have any tips, and do you have any tricks that you can tell us and that you can share with your colleagues here on the webinar that we can learn from one another? So definitely we want to hear from you. There are some interactive questions. I'll give you a hint there. There are some interactive questions that are coming up. And so the first one that answers those correctly will definitely receive some gifts there. So, so keep your eyes open for that. Lastly, we do have some resources, and you'll get a copy of this recording. It's usually available within the first 24 hours after we wrap up the session here. So you're more than welcome to review that again. You can share that with colleagues. You can even share it at a safety meeting, take pieces of that if you wanted to utilize that and that means. So any way that is that you want to utilize those resources, you're more than welcome. We also have some blogs and things like that that are located there at the bottom, along with a copy of the slide deck. So definitely those are made available, and you're welcome to use those however you need them. And then lastly, I know I said lastly before, but there's one more thing I just thought about. We're going to be actually next week in Charlotte, North Carolina for the NSC Spring Conference. So if you are interested and you have not already obtained a ticket for that, you're welcome to put your name in the box. Let us know that you need a ticket. We have some free passes and we'd be more than happy to send those to you. If you're there, we're going to be at booth 914. So definitely swing by and say hello. All right, let's go ahead and meet our superstars here. Let's meet our panel. Dr. Cherry, we'll start with you.
All right, thank you, Holly. My name is Scott Cherry. I'm Axiom Medical's Chief Medical Officer, and we had a client summit last week, and I think after the many years of us doing this together, Holly finally hypnotized me into saying I was the Chief Marketing Officer, so not bad after all the times, I would say, but you know, Dara and I both have the CMO titles here at Axiom, so anyway, I'll try not to embed that in my memory for the future. But I'm a preventive medicine and occupational medicine physician. I'm board certified in those specialties, and I've been supporting the U.S. military, government, and industrial operations for the past 15 to 20 years. And it's a pleasure to be with you.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Cherry. Emily, how about you?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Emily Roberts. I'm one of the owners of Snake Discovery. We are an educational reptile, I guess, experience, you could call it. We are based in Maplewood, Minnesota, so near St. Paul, where our home base has a reptile zoo that we focus on conservation and just education in general. We have a store, think of like a pet store, but specializing in reptiles only. And we also have an educational YouTube channel. So we try to teach people around the world about reptiles, amphibians, and invertebrates. So we have quite a few species of reptiles ourselves, and we just love teaching about them. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Tell us what's behind you. You were telling us that you had some snakes that are located right there behind you. So tell us what you have located there.
Yeah, so right next to me, you can kind of see their habitat. I have a couple Massasauga rattlesnakes. I have a Southern Pacific rattlesnake back here. Up there is a water moccasin, and down there is a water moccasin copperhead hybrid, just kind of for fun. But yeah, we keep most of the venomous stuff at our house just because, for safety reasons, we don't want our staff to accidentally encounter them improperly at our main facility. So we do have 2 rattlesnakes in our zoo, but those only my husband and I deal with. And so the rest of the hot is another word for venomous. The rest of the hot stuff is over at our house.
Hot. I don't think that we've ever referred to it as that. So that's a new term for us. All right, we'll coin that with you there. We'll be saying hot from now on instead of venomous. I like it. Ms. Dara Wheeler, introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name's Dara Wheeler. Like Scott said, I'm the non-medical CMO. So I've been with Axiom for 19 years and supporting our clients. I really enjoy this topic. I'm so glad we have Emily joining us. She's always really fun to bring on and talk about these things. Like Scott said, he and I have more of the medical side of it, but hearing from Emily as the expert has been really helpful so that we don't have to try to guess on some of these markings and different things that we're not as much of an expert in.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. This is awesome. I appreciate all of the panel joining. We're so excited to hear what it is that you're going to share. Just to give you an idea of what we're going to go through today. So we're going to have, kind of 4 buckets here that we're really going to focus on. The first being how it is that you can recognize some of these venomous threats. So what do they look like? What are some of the characteristics, et cetera? Then we're going to go through bite response and treatment. So in the event that you did have an unfortunate encounter there with one of these animals, then you would know what it is, that the steps that you want to take. We're going to go through how it is that you can avoid common mistakes. This is really where a lot of people miss the boat sometimes, is understanding or believing some of the myths that they've heard previously, and that can kind of get you into trouble. So we're definitely going to outline those. And then lastly, we're going to go over the prevention component. So how it is that you can prevent even coming in encounter with some of these species. So I'm going to turn it over to Dara first. And Dara, I'm going to throw an image out at you here. We've talked previously about scorpions before we jump into the snakes, but you had a fantastic scorpion story of your own that I was going to ask if you would share with us.
I don't know if fantastic's the right word for it, but traumatic maybe. So it's funny. I was thinking a lot about this story. I've told it a lot over the last few years, but it's interesting because I consider myself a pretty empathetic and sympathetic person, and as an employee at Axiom, I've supported our clients. Sorry, am I cutting out? Can you still hear me?
You're cutting out a
Yeah,
bit.
we can hear you now. Yeah. Try one more time.
My internet decided to give out on me.
Uh-oh.
You might have to skip over me, Holly.
No
Things are
worries. No worries.
slowing down.
Absolutely. We can move on ahead. Well, Dr. Sherry, I'm going to come to you then next and ask if you can kind of review with us. Tell us what the risk is of having a bite, whether that's, you know, snakes, spiders, et cetera. What kind of risk are we talking about?
Right. And, you know, so it looks like there's about 8,000, you know, venomous bites per year. So not super common, but not rare. And if it happens to you, it's definitely not infrequent. And so, you know, fatality is rare. I think from movies and maybe just hyperbole, you know, everyone gets really ramped up about snakes, and maybe Emily maybe that's one of the reasons she started her educational channel, was to help kind of educate, to control some of that fear. But the way we were trained in medical school about, you know, snake bites is the venomous snakes, they kind of have different flavors of toxins. So the pit vipers especially are known for a toxin or a venom that really attacks the blood vessels, the ability for the blood to coagulate, and attacks the actual blood vessels. So there's a lot of swelling. You become your blood pressure becomes very low because you're bleeding out. Your blood vessels are dilating, or you have internal bleeding. And then the other flavor of toxin or venom is from the coral snakes. It's really a neurotoxin. So similar to what maybe you see across the world with cobras or mambas. And their venom actually affects the ability for our muscles to contract. And so it's a neurotoxin. But, you know, all that together, still fatality is rare. But you do want to seek medical treatment, especially if you start to have any kind of symptoms beyond the local area. And then if treatment is delayed, you know, potentially workers may have a lasting injury or disability. So really getting that expertise early on is very important, because as time passes, the effects of the venom can make more and more damage exponentially.
Absolutely. And then Rudy was asking, are those stats, is that for the US?
Yes, the US.
All right, good deal. Well, Emily, we're going to come to you and let you tell us all about these snakes and how it is that we can identify them.
Fantastic. Yeah. So in the United States, all of our venomous species of snakes can be lumped into 4 different categories. And right here on the screen, you can see we have our copperheads, the cottonmouths, the rattlesnakes, and the coral snakes. So kind of going through them in order, the copperheads are a relatively smaller species of venomous snake. They only get about 2 to 3 feet long. They're pretty shy. They have alternating tan and brown bands down their bodies, and the darker colored brown bands typically take the shape of Hershey's Kisses. So they're that's a nice, easily recognizable trait that they have. That being said, some of the more Western locale copperheads just have evenly spaced bands that don't look like Hershey's Kisses at all. So one of many examples of, if you don't know what it is, don't approach it, because they can have differing patterns and colors, and even aberrant patterns as well. Like they can be born, since they're live bearers, they can be born just looking different than they should in the first place. But anyway, copperheads are native to the southeast US, and they dine primarily on rodents. but younger copperheads have been found to eat cicadas, interestingly enough. So there's been some studies on copperhead diet and how much of it consists of bugs, and we didn't realize that until recently, that they even ate cicadas. They prefer forested areas, but because of habitat loss and deforestation, they're more and more being seen in urban areas, and that makes them increasingly a threat to humans since they do have a medically significant bite. They don't want to chase you down and bite you at all. It's only a self-defense measure, but it is still something that you have to seek medical attention for immediately. The second species is the cottonmouth, as you can see on screen, top right corner. The cottonmouths are also native to the southeast US, and they get slightly larger than copperheads, growing up to 2 to 4 feet. And I think I read once of a 6-foot individual, although that's a bit of an outlier. They usually don't get more than 4 feet long. They're pretty stockier, thick-bodied snake, and they love the water. I mean, their secondary common name is the water moccasin. And because of that, they eat primarily fish and amphibians, and they're often seen by or in bodies of water. They're great at floating, so you might even see them floating on the surface of the water itself. They do have a hemotoxic venom, just like the copperheads, but again, they don't want to chase you down. They just want to use it on their prey, mostly fish for the cottonmouths, but they are often confused with water snakes, which are a completely non-venomous, harmless species. The water snakes look very similar to cottonmouths with a few differences. The cottonmouths typically have a more triangular shaped head. They also have a bar or a line that goes through their eye. And the water snakes have a thinner, more rounded shaped head. And instead of a band across their eye, they have vertical bands on their lips. So not that you want to get that close to be able to identify them. So if you don't know what it is, just leave it alone. But there are some imposters out there that look like cottonmouths that are actually harmless water snakes. The third species would be our largest, or our species or group with the largest variety, and that would be the rattlesnakes. We have 32 different species of rattlesnakes in the United States, and they live in a variety of habitats, from wetlands like the Massasauga rattlesnakes next to me here, to more dry, rocky outcrops like the timber rattlesnakes we see where I'm from, which is the Minnesota, Wisconsin area, and everything in between. But just like really everything, they are being seen closer and closer to people because of habitat loss. They, like their name implies, they can be pretty easily identified by the presence of a rattle at the end of their tail. When a rattlesnake is first born, however, it's born with just a single segment at the end of their tail. And these segments are made of keratin, just like our fingernails. But when they're first born, having only one segment means they don't have enough segments to hit each other and actually make a rattling sound. So babies cannot rattle. So again, if you don't know what it is, leave it alone. Is probably the safest measure there. But every time they shed their skin, which is more often when they're young because they're growing faster, they gain a segment every time they shed their skin. So you can kind of age a rattlesnake by the amount of segments they have. But that being said, if they're attacked by a predator or if they're just clumsy, which they can tend to be, they can break off sections of their rattle. So it's not a completely accurate way to age a rattlesnake. And last but not least, bottom right, we have the coral snakes, which are kind of the black sheep in the family. They have quite a few differences between the first 3 categories here. Coral snakes, we have 3 different species of in the United States. They all look very similar to one another, but instead of the stockier build that the previous 3 categories typically have, coral snakes are more slender bodied. They only get, again, probably about 2 to 3 feet, so they're also smaller, but they eat reptiles and like snakes and lizards, as opposed to the fish or the rodents that the other 3 categories typically eat. Coral snakes, though, although they're reluctant to bite, they are also native to the southeast US. They are reluctant to bite. They're pretty, I don't want to say docile because they are a dangerous animal, but they don't want to chase you down. They don't want to bite you unless they absolutely have to. So when they do, it is, again, medically significant. They have a neurotoxic venom, which affects the nervous system and can cause paralysis, whereas the previous 3 all have that hemotoxic venom. So, yeah, it kind of comes down to these snakes don't want to hurt you. They just want to do their own snaky thing. Is it okay if I jump to the next?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Since I'm doing the 2 here, is that all right?
Yeah, go ahead. Talk to us about the characteristics.
Okay, perfect. So those first three categories, the copperheads, cottonmouths, and rattlesnakes, all fit into the, I guess, umbrella category of the pit vipers. And like Dr. Scott was saying earlier, these pit vipers they have some common characteristics. They all have the vertical or thin shaped pupils. This doesn't indicate that a snake is venomous, though, the pupil shape. It just indicates whether they're diurnal or nocturnal. And it just so happens that the copperheads, the cottonmouths, and the rattlesnakes are all nocturnal species, so they all do have vertical pupils, but that rule of thumb doesn't work with all species of snakes around the world. Another characteristic with all these pit vipers is they typically have triangular shaped heads, and the problem with that is a lot of snakes have learned, over years of evolution, if they flatten out their own head, they look like a venomous species. So there are some tricksters out there, and that's just their method of defense. But the term pit viper refers to the heat-sensing pit organs that are located between their nostril and their eye that the copperheads, cottonmouths, and rattlesnakes have. And they use these pits to see the infrared view of their surroundings. So they have that extra sixth sense, really. If you were to blindfold them, they'd be able to hunt just fine, and it's just from the use of those pits. And finally, the pit vipers have fangs that are, I guess, hinged more than rotating. They hinge back or they fold back, and they can extend them out when they do inject their prey with venom, and then they just hinge them back into place, whereas the oddball coral snakes have what are called fixed fangs. So they have smaller fangs that are attached to the front of their mouth, but they don't move around at all. So yeah, those are the common characteristics of the pit vipers, which again are the copperheads, cottonmouths, and rattlesnakes.
Wow. Emily, you're so knowledgeable about this. We've had some questions that have actually came in that I was going to ask you about. The first one came from Larry, was asking, have you heard from the Texas GNF that rattlers are not rattling as often due to feral hogs?
Oh, I haven't heard of it being attributed to feral hogs. I've heard that they're thinking there's a connection between the rattlesnake roundups in Texas. There are so many that if they rattle to give their presence away, they're captured and bagged and essentially slaughtered at these rattlesnake roundups that are an annual event in Texas. So the individuals that don't have a rattle or just don't use that behavior of rattling to give away their presence, those are being favored to survive, and natural selection is happening, and they aren't rattling as much.
Wow. Okay. Sarah was also asking how often do they shed, and I assume she's talking about the rattlesnakes, and we were talking about those and maybe the babies whenever the question had came in.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I kind of jumped ahead there. But yeah, every time they shed, they do gain that segment on their rattle, and snakes in general shed more frequently when they're young, and that's because they're growing at a quicker rate. They're trying to get out of that prey size for everything. So I mean, it's probably every 3 to 4 weeks a baby snake on average will shed its skin. And as an adult, it's closer to once every few months, give or take.
Wow. All right. Alan was asking, said, although non-venomous water snakes, can they still aggressively bite?
They love to bite, yes. So the non-venomous water snakes, I've trekked through a river once, and you see them either floating in the water or hanging out on a branch just above the water. They're just waiting for fish. They love using their mouth as a self-defense measure. And the weird thing is they have an anticoagulant in their saliva. So when they bite you, which is it's a bite and let go. It's just a warning. A snake will only bite and hang on if it actually wants to eat you. So they're just biting and letting go constantly if you're holding a wild water snake. But the anticoagulant, oh man, it does make you look like you have a worse injury than you actually do.
Wow. Let's see. We also had one that came in from Joe that was asked, that had mentioned, we had a baby rattlesnake on my facility property last week. If we found one baby snake, should we concern that more are nearby? Great question.
That is a great question. Also, I'm jealous that you found a baby rattlesnake outside. That would make my day. They are adorable. I would say, yeah, if there is a baby, that chances are there are quite a few others as well. Just knowing that they're a live-bearing species, that probably means mom is somewhat near the vicinity. Not that you want to hurt baby snake or hurt any adults that you see, but it just means you have a favorable environment for them. So whether that means there's a pile of rocks or a pile of logs that they particularly like, or long grass, they like that kind of stuff too. So there are some things you can do to encourage them to move on, like removing piles of rocks and logs and trimming the grass so it's shorter. But you kind of just have to accept the fact that we do share a habitat with quite a few species of snakes, depending on where we live.
Uh-huh. All right. There was one more that came in that I'll catch you with. Ken was asking, he said, you mentioned the copperheads. Let's see. You mentioned the copperheads were nocturnal, but the other day I stepped right over one on the sidewalk in urban Atlanta. Is it common for them to be in populated areas during the day?
Yes, especially during this time of year, they're trying to warm up since it's a bit chillier still down in Atlanta. So they're trying to get out during the daytime to warm up. Being an ectothermic creature, they need to warm up their own body temperature in order to digest their food. So it was probably out during the day just because it was warmer at that point. And the opposite can also happen during the summer in very warm climates like Arizona. During the middle of the summer, it's so hot that it's too hot for a snake. So instead they come out at night and they sit on the still warm roads overnight to warm up to a more comfortable temperature. So yes, the overall temperature can definitely change that behavior.
All right. And then Angeline was also asking, do you train on how to handle rattlesnakes? She had mentioned that they have an on-site team that is there that would be assisting removal. And I'm sure she's asking, do you have some best practices that you train people on with those?
Like, do we personally train?
I think that's
Sure.
That's what the question is. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Where can you learn how to properly work with venomous snakes? Although I don't train them myself, just for liability reasons. I feel like I could, but I'm too nervous, with insurance and all that to do that. I went to the Save the Snakes Foundation, has a wonderful training course in San Francisco, and there's another one in Florida with the Rattlesnake Conservancy. They both have a 2-day venomous species training course. So you can learn how to properly pick them up with a hook, put them safely in a bucket, and relocate them. So I would highly recommend looking into the Save the Snakes Foundation or the Rattlesnake Conservancy.
I think I'm going to leave that task to you to handle the snakes when it comes to how it is that you're going to pick those up. All right. Good questions. Excellent information, Emily. Let's talk about spiders as well while we're on the same topic. Dr. Cherry, talk to us about the different types that could also be venomous and cause a problem.
Yeah, so here you see the two most popular venomous spiders in North America. So on top, it's the brown recluse, which is singularly brown, and it really doesn't have any other distinctive markings of bands, mottling, or stripes. It does have this darker violin-shaped mark on the cephalothorax, which is kind of the body and head kind of together. It's kind of like, looking at us without a neck. So if our head was just focused onto our chest. They're known for their kind of unusual eyes, where most spiders have 8 eyes in rows of 4. So recluses have this unique form of 6 equal-sized eyes arranged in 3 pairs, and that's in front of this head, chest, cephalothorax. And then shifting to the black widow, obviously it's shiny black, but it has this really pretty red or orange hourglass shape marking on the underside on its abdomen. And this does have the classic 8 eyes arranged in 2 rows. And so these are what we really see in North America that we need to be concerned with.
Yeah. Dr. Cherry, my husband ran into a black widow. We were moving some wood outside, some of the wood for the fireplace that we use in the winter. And anyways, we were moving some, and there was a black widow that was there. I think I jumped about 9 feet in the air when I saw it. But anyways, very, very great information and very helpful.
Just real quick, we talked about kind of the different venoms, whether it's neuro or cytotoxic or blood vessel toxic. And so the black widow really has that kind of neurotoxic effect. And it can actually mirror, some of the pain can spread throughout the body and sometimes mimic a surgical abdomen, like an abdomen, like, your appendix has burst, things like that. And so sometimes you'll get a surgical referral just because of that type of bite. So pretty interesting. And then when you, I think classically the brown recluse is known for this cytotoxic venom where if you get bit, you potentially can develop a lot of swelling and also cause what's called a compartment syndrome, where there's a lot of pressure building up in a closed part of the body. I know of a Marine that had that happen to the front of his shin and had to have a lot of surgery and removal of connective tissue and even a lot of the muscle just to preserve the lower leg. And so, you know, these can be very disabling. That Marine was not able to stay in active duty. So these are things we definitely need to pay attention to.
That's awful. There were some great questions that came in about this, and there was one that I'd never even seen before. Let's see. It came from James and was asking, are both genders of the spider just as venomous?
Ooh.
Look this one up while we were talking because I wasn't sure.
That I do not know. I would need to kind of look that up. Very interesting.
So I just looked it up. It says, according to what my quick research found, only the female black widow spider bites when disturbed. And that brown recluse, typically, I think somebody asked about how aggressive they are, that typically they aren't aggressive or are more nocturnal and typically only bite when threatened. It says that they really like the warm, dark environments like barns, wood piles, attics, basements, closets.
I guess that makes sense based on its name. I mean, I don't know if I know this is for certain, but I suspect the name Black Widow is because of the female being venomous.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it sounds like it's the answer was probably in the name.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Let's see. Sarah, yes. Sarah said, I found brown recluses in South Texas as well as a black widow in Southern California. Yikes, Sarah. And then let's see. Good question, Eric. Eric said, are they doing anything good or should we just kill them when we see them?
I looked this one up too. I thought it was a great question. And it's funny because I've actually done the same and looked up, like, do wasps and bees and, mosquitoes actually do anything good? Because I get pretty frustrated by mosquitoes in the summer in Houston. It does say that, and it's probably similar to what Emily's answered beyond snakes in terms of helping balance the ecosystems in their environments, because black widows and other spiders do help keep pest insect populations in balance. So they are helping make sure that flies, mosquitoes, locusts, caterpillars are all in balance in the ecosystem.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and I don't know if Emily, you come across that in your work with snakes, but just in general, like if I look at this as a philosophical question, I think, well, before it's a philosophical question, I do like what Dara said, the ecosystem is been balanced over, probably millions of years. But from a philosophical perspective, I do think all life has value, but that's easy for me to say from my office. So again, you have to balance if you're out in the field and there is kind of a known risk, but, try to keep that philosophy of, and maybe even the natural unfolding of our history biologically where, our ecosystem has become fine-tuned. And so, trying to preserve all life is very important.
Okay. Several of you, actually, we've had 3 in a row that have mentioned this, so we definitely mention it here. But all of you have said that she eats her mate. And there were several different ways that you guys had said that. And then the last one was Andy had said, we have black widows all in Arizona. The urban answer is black widow is because they eat the male spider after mating. Wow.
There's quite a few species that do that. I think that's why in many species of spiders, the males are the smaller ones because they're trying to sneak away as fast as and be as least noticeable as possible. Sometimes they can make it out, but not that often.
Wow.
It's a scary trend.
Go ahead. Did I miss it? Were you mentioning something else, Dr. Sherry?
I was just saying, that's a scary trend, personally. Yeah.
Absolutely. Dr. Cherry, there was a question for you that was asking how quickly does the venom destroy the tissue with brown recluse bites?
So that's delayed, so it can be very tricky to manage. So if you can identify it as a brown recluse, then getting care sooner than later, especially before you become symptomatic, is key. So this is a very delayed 2 to 8 hours or longer. And so I would call this one of the more tricky things to manage, because many times you're going to watch and wait. So I think for this audience, it's easier because our audience is employers. And so really every bite should get assessed. I think the most dangerous is like if you're just at home, and you kind of have a lackadaisical approach of I'll watch and wait. But I think for this audience, with work relatedness being part of it, our employers do have like a fiduciary responsibility to make sure they get care sooner than later.
Okay. We're getting a lot of questions asking about medical care and how it is that we manage these. So let's talk about what it is that you do if you were to be bitten. Dr. Cherry and Dara, you want to take us through this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, we talked about this a little bit, and you have to manage trying to identify the snake or spider bite with your own safety or being re-bitten or stung. But it is helpful in some of these cases, like the brown recluse, and then obviously for the snakes as well. I think geography can help a lot with the snakes, potentially, maybe not so much with the spiders, but good first aid is always the way to go forward with any type of injury. And so washing with soap and water is really critical. You want to stay relaxed. Try not to raise your heart rate and blood pressure because that can help distribute the venom faster. You do want to keep the area immobilized if possible, and elevate limbs to the level of the heart, which kind of helps slow the circulation to that area. And because a lot of these bites have that cytotoxic, so it really impacts connective tissue, a lot of swelling, you do want to remove rings, watches, or even constrictive clothing because you can have a significant amount of swelling.
Okay. We did have another question that came in, Brittany was asking, if you know that you've been bitten and it looks like a spider bite, but you can't find the culprit, what should you do?
Yeah, so especially for this audience, definitely want to seek, like a medical assessment just to get better understanding of what are the risks. Waiting sometimes can cause a lot of issues, especially if it's a brown recluse and depending on the area that you're bitten. And then it's also, there's layers to this, but if you're stung like at the face or eye or, near your neck, things like that, or if you're, if it's a child or someone older or with significant medical conditions, comorbidities, like it's even more apparent. But still seeking medical care sooner than later is really the way forward.
Okay.
I think we've talked about this before in the past. Do not bring the specimen into the physician's office with you. If you do happen to have the spider or snake, do not bring it in.
Take a
You're
picture
welcome.
of it.
Take a picture. Yeah, take a picture. Pictures work great.
Yeah, I was thinking about this recently, being in the Houston area. I'm not afraid of snakes, but I know this is definitely the time of year where they are starting to come out. And I was on a little hike. I made sure to bring a buddy so that in case I got bitten, somebody else could identify the snake for me.
Emily, have you guys ever had a snake bite there at any of your facilities?
Knock on wood, nothing venomous, only non-venomous stuff. But we take the handling of them very seriously because we don't want to encounter that. We do work with a few mildly venomous species, but they're not medically significant enough to really be that worried about. It's going to be like localized swelling. So from the medically significant ones, we have not.
Okay. All right. Well, remember in the beginning when I told you that we had some questions that you can that you could engage with and that we wanted you to be aware of? We're coming up on one, and I'm going to read you the scenario, and the first person that answers the question, you will get that prize. So James is a construction worker. He's walking through a grassy job site. He suddenly feels a sharp stabbing pain in his right ankle. He's startled. He jumps back. He sees this brownish colored snake that's there, and he hears this rattling sound. Within minutes, he feels severe pain at the bite site and noticed his ankle swelling rapidly, along with feeling his heart racing by the time that he walked back to his truck. So the question is, where would you seek treatment? Where would you go for the antivenom? Would your answer be that you go to a local hospital that maybe is 4 miles away, or would you go ahead and go to a regional trauma center that would be 34 miles away? Let's see, we're getting some good answers. Let's see. All right. The first one, I think it was Ken Elkinson. Ken, you were right. Dr. Cherry, talk us through then what specific then the treatment would be for these types of scenarios, and why does that make sense that you would not want to bypass your local facility to go to a larger one?
Yeah, I think there was this strategy at some point to where, emergency response systems realize there's a lot of inefficiency with people trying to triage themselves and figure out where to go. Maybe a trauma center further away is better than a smaller emergency room closer. And so fortunately, it's been established that there are anti-venom stockpiles that are positioned strategically to where really the thing to take home from this is you should go to the closest emergency room to you. That way they can arrange for the anti-venom to be transported as efficiently as possible. And then they can be doing all of the other assessments and first aid and laboratory testing just to make sure to see how you're, progressing from the, what type of, what level of envenomation you're having, and if you're having systemic and organ issues from that venom.
Yeah. So tell us then what the steps would be. Say that you had a snake bite. What steps do you want to follow?
So you do want to engage with the emergency medical system. So call 911 or go to your closest emergency room. You do want to do some first aid with getting to a safe area. Washing the wound, staying calm, elevating the limb like we spoke about earlier. And then again, take yourself or if you have someone that can take you to the closest emergency room will be absolutely critical. And then the ER physician can determine if, they're thinking about giving you anti-venom or watch and wait through observation in that facility.
Yeah. Larry was asking, can you use the antivenom more than once? And if not, should you bypass the treatment facility there, the closest one, if you're young and healthy?
So you should go to the closest site regardless. I wouldn't try to come up with your own medical treatment strategy. So going to the closest emergency department would probably be the best course of action. There is discussions and cases where, yes, if you've had multiple rounds of anti-venom, you have an allergic reaction. And so that's really a high level medical decision that really should be kept at the emergency room physician's discretion. And so if you've had it in the past, I wouldn't triage yourself to a further higher level of care that's further away, time-wise in transit, things like that.
Okay. Devin asked a great question as well. So if you are in a remote backcountry area, is it okay to hike miles to get to your vehicle and go to the ER, or would you want to call 911 and land management to be evacuated from there?
That's a really good one. I think my gut feeling, and maybe Emily or Dara, if you have some thoughts, is doing some research before your trip to see what snakes are known to be out there and what is kind of the traditional way people handle some kind of emergency response like that. Unless you're just going off the grid, that isn't a known hiking area or adventure sport area. Emily or Dara, do you have any thoughts as well?
Yeah, if it helps, all of the pit vipers in North America are treated using the same antivenom. So you don't need the specific species, although it may help as far as like how many vials. Was this a 2-foot copperhead or a 6-foot rattlesnake? That might indicate how large the venom glands are and therefore how much antivenom you might need. But you don't absolutely need the species exactly, since they're all treated with crofab. That being said, that one oddball group of venomous snakes, the coral snake, is treated with its own species-specific antivenom, along with many other species around the world have their own species-specific. But we're kind of fortunate here in the US in that it's all treated with crofab for the copperheads, cottonmouths, and rattlesnakes.
Okay. Talk to us about the spider bites, Dr. Sherry. We've had lots of questions that are coming in about those as well.
Right. And so, each will have a little bit different presentation depending on whether it's a brown recluse or a black widow. So, the brown recluse, you'll end up getting a skin rash with blue and purple areas, potentially a red ring around the bite. And, you'll definitely have some body aches and pain. And that's from just a mild bite. And then with a severe case, you would actually get systemic symptoms, kind of like you would feel flu-like symptoms, fevers, chills, and then you may even see blood in your urine, which can be very unsettling. And then with black widow bites, you'll still have redness and swelling at the site. You may have that abdominal cramps, which may present as appendicitis or some kind of other surgical abdomen, muscle spasms, and then pain that radiates through the body.
So would you use the antivenom then for the spiders as well?
So it's a little bit different than snake bites. Usually it's much more of a conservative care, monitoring labs to make sure the organs are still functioning well. And I haven't seen antivenom used for those. And for brown recluse specifically, it's kind of making sure that a compartment syndrome does not form, or if it does form, there's a very quick response surgically to relieving the pressure.
Okay. There was a question that came in, Carrie, that was wanting confirmation. So did we get an answer to the question about would it be better to hike miles or call EMS?
I'm actually not positive on that one, so that might be a more Dr. Cherry question.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's very, probably take some time to think through potentially, how far are you going, and
I see what
just
you were
doing like a
getting
risk
at.
assessment based on the specifics. It's hard to kind of say it as a general consensus. The big thing is, which type of snake is it? How bad of a bite it is? How fast are you getting, symptoms? And then how far do you have to actually hike? I probably would be leaning towards, getting care sent to you if you're having symptoms pretty quickly. It sounds like a terrible choice.
Health of the individual too,
Say
right?
again,
Like the health of the individual too.
Yeah.
In terms of your response. So I think unfortunately, Carrie, it's going to be it depends on a lot of things.
Yeah.
You definitely don't want to.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to mention, because I saw this question earlier too. You don't want to avoid medical treatment if you think you can kind of get away with it. Like, I've heard of people getting bit by some of the more less effective species venom, or as far as bites go, and it was the worst couple of weeks of their life, even though they did make it through. But you don't be hesitant to go in for anti-venom, because you can receive it multiple times. It's not just a once and done opportunity. If you have second or third incidences with venomous snakes, you can get treated with anti-venom each time.
Okay. One more question about this, and then we'll move on to the others. But David was asking, does the location of the bite determine how quickly that you should act?
Definitely. And this is just in general. I would say, again, for our audience, we should all, be reacting immediately, but especially if you're bit, in the face, neck, extremities, depending on, like for brown recluse, again, are very predisposed to this compartment syndrome. But like if a snake bite, towards the face or neck or things like that, I would be even more apt to react sooner than later.
Okay. All right, here's the second one, and we're going to give you a scenario, and we want you to tell us what went wrong here. So we'll take the first 5 answers is what we'll give gifts to. So Carlos is a landscaping supervisor, and he's working near a wooded area when he suddenly feels a sharp pain in his left calf. He looks down, he sees a brownish snake, triangular head, dark markings along the body. He starts feeling dizzy, notices that there's some swelling that's there around the bite. And remembering some advice that he had heard in the past, he ties the belt tightly around the bite to stop the venom from spreading. He grabs ice from the work cooler. He presses it into the bite to reduce the swelling. And then he uses his pocket knife to write an X over the bite and tries to suck out the venom. Wanting to help the doctors identify that, he catches it with the shovel, puts it in a bucket, and brings it to the hospital with him. What went wrong there? Andy, good. Andy's saying delayed treatment by trying to treat himself. He has symptoms and should initiate EMS. He didn't seek treatment. All of it. John, good. No tourniquet. Exactly. You guys are on the right. You're on the right path there.
Holly, the number one issue is he didn't call Axiom. So
that's right. That's from the very beginning. So Dr. talk us through then what some of these myths are that we want to make sure that we avoid, that we see on TV or we've seen in a movie, that we want to make sure that we're not continuing those practices.
Yeah, and before med school, like I was highly educated on these things from watching movies, and what's more dramatic than cutting it open, sucking out the poison, and putting a tourniquet on. But again, I adjust a little bit, but really we want to kind of hammer home these myths to avoid. So do not tie a tourniquet around the wound. Do not apply ice or heat to the wound. Do not try to cut the wound and suck the venom out. Do not bypass the closest emergency department, as again, the antivenom is stored in central locations. And then, do not bring a live snake to the emergency department.
Okay, good deal. And just to kind of give you an idea of who the winners were for that one, we have Andy, we have Sarah, we have John Wilson, and we have Angela Diaz. So good job for those, and we'll make sure that we reach out to you after this to send some gifts. So, all right, let's talk about some best practices then for how it is that you can prevent exposure. Emily, do you want to talk us through some of these?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So there's quite a few things that we can do to prevent bites, to prevent exposure. I kind of touched on them a little bit earlier in that the preferred habitats can be manipulated to either encourage or discourage snakes from being in the area. So they, again, like piles of rocks, they like piles of logs. So the tall grass is also mentioned here. So you can change those to encourage or discourage. They're curious creatures. I mean, snakes, along with all wildlife, will check out garage doors or open vacant areas. And that might include, I mean, Toy Story had it right. There's a snake in my boot. That has happened before. So if you're in an area where you know venomous species are living and it's their preferred habitat, it's better to play it safe and just be aware of your surroundings. Whether that means anything from as obvious as checking in your shoe to checking around your car, because if your car is in the sunlight and there's shade underneath, and say a snake is hot, they're going to seek out shade. And that might mean they're just underneath your car where you approach to get in. So just, again, being aware of your surroundings when you're in those natural areas where you might see venomous species. It's also a good idea to, and I've said it a couple times so far, if you don't know what something is, don't approach it to try to identify it. Just leave it alone. It's going to be the safest for everybody involved. And finally, what you wear can also change what you encounter or your experiences outside in the field. The long pants help for more insect repellent more than anything. Snakes, fangs can definitely make it through just about any material. So the long pants aren't really going to protect you from venomous snake bites. However, there are things out there called gaiters that will protect your shins, which is most likely to get bitten out in the field. So if you know you're going to be potentially exposed to, say, rattlesnakes, it's definitely worth investing in gaiters just to wrap around your legs, give you peace of mind since they are venomous snake proof. There's some other products out there too, like full-on snake proof boots that go up to your knees. They're about $200 a pair, but those are actually surprisingly efficient and they're not that uncomfortable either. So it's worth looking into those things if you're going to be outside for a good amount of time.
Definitely. I don't think I've heard of the gaiters before. Is that just something, it's like it goes there on your shins, like it has elastic around it, or what, how does that work?
Yeah, it's like an all-around shin guard, essentially, that's just made out of a material that's so thick or dense that it prevents the fangs from protruding all the way through. Has little, elastic Velcro straps to strap it around, so you'll get sweaty underneath it, but it's worth it.
Definitely. That's a great tip. Let's talk about some of the tick bites. Dr. Cherry, talk us through the tick bites, what the risk is, what we're looking at, the first aid measures, in the event that you were bit by a tick, et cetera.
Certainly, and Lyme disease is probably the most common tick-borne illness that we're really worried about, and it does have some massive impacts that start out subtle. So it is important to think about tick-borne diseases, especially in areas that are highly prevalent with Lyme disease. And so, the first aid for tick bites is to remove the tick as soon as possible. And so if you're in areas that are endemic of ticks and especially Lyme disease, you do want to have some type of routine where you check yourself for ticks regularly, because you can actually have a tick bite without knowing it. I think a lot of the ticks have the ability to do some of the like Emily said, with some of the snakes, that they can prevent blood clotting, but they also have like an anesthetic. So when they burrow in, it actually, you're not aware of it. So, and you want to be having a person help look in places where you can't readily see on your body. But again, remove the tick as soon as you detect it. You try to want to use a tick removal tool like fine tip tweezers. You want to remove it as close to the skin as possible, so that way the head is not left in there. Then, like every other first aid measure, you want to wash the area thoroughly with soap and water. And then really just watch and see how if you have any further developments of if that wound gets worse, or especially if you get symptomatic, systemic symptoms.
Okay. And I believe that we had a question that came in that was asking specifically about removal. And so is that what your recommendation is to utilize the tweezers there to be able to get the tick and remove it?
Right. And there may be, like commercial packages off the shelf that are specifically for ticks that help kind of make it easier if you're not skilled at doing this regularly.
Okay. All right. Wrap us up with scorpion stings. These hurt. These hurt a lot.
I think Dara is our scorpion expert. She's
Unfortunately. And I think it's very type specific. I know in Texas, most of the stings feel like a painful sting, and the neurotoxins are relatively mild. I was stung by one in Mexico where the neurotoxins were heavily, or very, very strong neurotoxin. And so definitely experienced the downside of this. And you can treat them with antivenom just like you can with snakes, but it's often better to not treat with antivenom for a scorpion because the treatment might actually be less good of an experience than first aid measures and other recommendations. But again, get medical help. And I know we're just about out of time, so I'm not going to go beyond that. Holly, do you want to take over?
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for joining us today. We're at time, but I appreciate all of your questions, and definitely we will be reaching out to many of you to follow up on some gifts. So if you haven't already, make for sure that you press the register now button there at the top so you can get registered for the next event for the heat-related illnesses. And we look forward to seeing you in May.